You're listening to episode 56 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Ashlee Berghoff about how we can navigate time management from a place of peace and confidence. So stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and coach trained in functional medicine with a passion for helping women just like you ditch perfectionism and use food, fitness, and self-care to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. I believe that it's possible to achieve your biggest life-changing goals without the frustration, obsession, or negative self-talk that so many women subject themselves to every day. All you need are the right tools, the right mindset, and the faith to turn your dreams into reality. I'm here to guide you along the way. The truth is that you are so much more than a body, and I'm on a mission to help you change the way you think and act at a core beliefs level so you can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health from the inside out. Are you ready to become fed and fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, meaningful life? Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm your host as always, and today we have a very interesting episode all about time management. And time management is something that as an entrepreneur, I've had to learn a lot about, especially because I'm not necessarily the most naturally organized person. And over the years, running my own business and, having a lot of other stuff going on in my life, I don't have kids yet, but, there's a lot of stuff going on that I need to manage my time around. I've learned a lot of strategies and tricks and tools and all of the different ways that we can make our time more effective and make sure that we are spending our time doing the things that are most important to us. So that's why I was really excited to bring on the show today, Ashlee Berghoff. Ashlee Berghoff is the founder of A Squared Online, which gets people off the hamster wheel by helping them take clear and focused action, implement time-saving systems, and delegate effectively. As her clients become more effective and productive, they can cut out the noise, experience real momentum, and confidently channel their time and energy into the things that matter most to them. Ashlee is the author of Eureka Results: How Entrepreneurs Can Turn Their Best Ideas into Reality, which will be published in April of 2021. She has been featured on the Copywriter Club podcast, Reigniting Main Street, and Copy Chief Radio. You can find her online at www.asquaredonline.com. And like I said, Ashlee tends to focus more on entrepreneurs. That's who she works with. But I really do think that these strategies that we use in entrepreneurship to make sure that we're getting things done on time, to make sure our business is running smoothly, that these things can really come into play in any situation, in any type of lifestyle, because we're all managing our time at every single minute of the day. It's not like only entrepreneurs are doing time management. So that's why I wanted to bring her on, because like I said, there's been so much that I've learned as an entrepreneur that I feel like really applies to living a more productive life, no matter what you're doing with your time. And I think a lot of the strategies that you're almost forced to implement as an entrepreneur can actually make everybody's life a lot better. So I'm excited to have Ashlee on. And without further ado, here is Ashlee Berghoff. All right, everybody. I am super pumped to have with me on the show today, Ashlee Berghoff. Welcome to the show, Ashlee.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, well, you are going to be talking about a topic that I used to think I was terrible at, and now I feel like I'm okay at. I feel like entrepreneurship has definitely kicked me into gear with time management. And I don't have kids yet, but I assume if I do have kids, that'll be the next level of time management. But time management and organization and systems and all that stuff is something that I feel like it applies to everybody, not just entrepreneurs, not just career people. Stay-at-home moms can use time management skills better to really get the things done that they want to do and also have more time for the things that they care about. So I'm really glad to have you on the show talking about it, because I do think the ability to manage your time well is valuable not only to people's physical and mental health, but also their ability to be successful in the things that they're pursuing. So all of that said, I would love to hear your story and just learn a little bit more about how, and
our audience, I would love for them to get to know you better as well. How did you become so passionate about time management?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've always loved organization. I've been a bit of a nerd that way. But what's really funny about that is even though I loved it, I was not good at it for a very long time. So I started out in the nonprofit and then the consulting space, working in corporate jobs. And my initial bosses had to help me learn how to manage my time effectively. You know, when you come out of college, it's a completely different way of being in the world, right? And so I started to learn how to keep up with a very fast pace in my last corporate job. It was very, very stressful, very high expectations. I was also studying for an MBA in the evenings. And during that time, I met and married my husband. So it was just an incredibly high pressure time in my life. And out of necessity, I had to learn how to keep up with everything, how to survive in this environment. And I thought incorrectly that because I had been able to do that, all of a sudden I was the master of managing my time effectively and I had figured out the system, right? And I quit my job to start A Squared in 2017. And a few months later, graduated from school. And I thought, well, there went the job, there went school. Everything's going to be so peaceful and zen now because I have full control over my time. And what I did not realize was there was this whole deeper level beneath that of my expectations for myself, of the pace I had become accustomed to. And I immediately filled all that free space with a million projects and all the things that I had been putting off for the 3 years that I was in school. So the pace stayed just as impossibly fast for months after graduation, after I had been expecting this just huge weight to lift. And through that process, I realized that I had to start doing this deeper work with myself of understanding what my time meant, what it meant about what I was worth. You know, there were these weird things about value and success and all of this much under the external circumstances I had blamed for my pace of life that I had to work on. And so I started iterating new ways of managing my time, of thinking about my time. And meanwhile, I was working as an independent business manager with entrepreneurs and helping them run their businesses and realizing how much this was affecting them too. And so over that time, I became more and more passionate about not just figuring out for myself how to show up in the world in the way that I wanted to, but also how to help other people do the same. Because I think time management has been relegated to like organized people, quote unquote, and planners and 5-step blog posts, when really it's one of the most important aspects of our lives. And so now I just love the idea of helping people show up in the world in the way they want to when it comes to how they lead with their time.
Yeah, I love it. And I always tell my business coaching clients that time is really a more valuable resource than money because you can't get more time. You can always make more money, even if, you know, and if you're not an entrepreneur, you might be like, well, I don't know if I can always make more money. But when you run an online business, when you run your own business, and I think the online business space is like even more so in this way, you can create more revenue, you can create more money. It's actually something that you can affect as far as the amount that you have. Whereas time, we all have, like, it's always ticking down. There's no way to stop it. There's no way to get more of it. Like, you know, we don't know when our time is going to end, but we know that it's going to end and then it's done, right? So time management, I think, is really, really valuable, not only from a sense of productivity, but also the opposite of productivity, which is really like the enjoyment of life and the things, like pursuing the things that are meaningful to you. And I so resonated with that part of your story where you were sharing, saying that, like, I thought I was going to have all this amazing time and my schedule is going to be so free. And then it like went straight back into what it was before. Cause I've had a very similar experience this year where I made some really big shifts in my business and started changing the way I was serving clients, started with like a completely brand new focus on business owners and helping them grow their business rather than actually running a nutrition business and serving nutrition clients. And for like a very brief, glorious period of time, it felt like I was like not having that much to do. And it felt really like chill and slow. And, you know, 5 months later, after making this shift, I'm already back into that like
working way more than I want to work. And luckily I'm like aware of it. And I'm like, okay, got to make some changes to fix this. Cause I think it definitely is very much wrapped up in identity, like you were saying before. And I've done a lot of work on my own identity. And I think for me, a lot of the identity issue comes into play where I want to see what I'm capable of. And unfortunately, what that ends up looking like is, well, if I just crank out a little extra, that's like what I'm capable of. And so it's definitely been a challenge for me. So I'm really excited to get these tips myself as an entrepreneur. And like I said, I think it doesn't matter what you're spending your time doing. You want to be spending it doing the things that matter to you and not wasting it on stuff that actually doesn't matter. So all of that said, as you mentioned, you work mainly with entrepreneurs, but I really think everything I've learned about entrepreneurship has applied so strongly to just living a better life in general. And so I love talking about this stuff. And I think we can really apply it to life in general. So what have you learned from working with entrepreneurs that can apply to all of us, especially women? Because I think women have a very different demand on their schedules compared to men. And what can we learn from your work with entrepreneurs that can help us navigate our time management in whatever lifestyle we're living?
Yeah. So what I didn't expect when I started my business is that it's, like you said, so closely tied to life and how we live life and what life means to us. And especially when it comes to how we manage our time, in a lot of ways, entrepreneurs just have more control over their time, but have all the same challenges, all the same pitfalls as anybody in any phase of life, right? So you're jumping on the same trampoline just without a net. So when you don't have the net of someone else coming in and saying, hey, focus on this instead, or hey, I need you here, you have to learn even more how to do that for yourself, right? So it becomes a space where you have to build the muscle. But all of that muscle can be an incredible resource in a full-time corporate job, in managing your home, in reaching the goals that you have as a person, right? And one of those things that I found really interesting is redefining what systems means. I think for most of us, when we think about systems in the context of time management, we think about checklists, we think about processes and documentation and rigid rules about how we're supposed to do things, right? But if we step back for a second, a system is just how we do things. Brushing your teeth is a simple system. Using a road to get from here to the grocery store is using an infrastructure system, right? We're surrounded by systems. We use them all the time, and we have them in our lives no matter what. So when I think about the routines I have with my daughter, who's a toddler, setting up systems for us to live and work together as a family has made it a lot easier for me to understand exactly how I want that to look. When am I going to be working? What kind of support do I need from my husband, from my babysitter, right? Where are we plugging these pieces in? That's a system. And so when we understand that we're surrounded by systems, that we actually have a lot of levers to pull, a lot of control, then it makes it a lot easier to see them and then to make decisions about them. So we don't have to say, I have to do this, and then I have to do that, and then someone else is making me do this. You can say, you know what? This isn't how I want my life to look. I'm going to do something different, and I have a lot more control over that than I thought. So it's been helpful, I think, bringing that from entrepreneurship into normal life to say, systems isn't just for work. It's not just for organized people, quote unquote. It's something that can become a really powerful tool to leverage in our lives to build the life that we want, to structure it in the way that we want.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I feel like a lot of what I've learned about just the way the human brain works, where the vast majority of the actions we take are happening at a subconscious level. Mm-hmm. Those subconscious actions are based in the systems that our brain has learned, whether or not it was intentional or not, right? So it's like, we didn't necessarily make our brain follow that structure, but it developed the structure as a lot of times it's structures that we built when we were kids, like stuff like mm-hmm. that. Mm-hmm. And it's like almost you operate on autopilot and assume, well, that's just the way that
things work, right? And you don't realize that, no, that's just a decision that you made and are now following almost like on a loop because that's what you were taught, or that's how you coped with a different situation or something like that. So I think it's really cool to always just, like you said, step back and kind of almost have this like observer's perspective on what does your life look like and what are the things that are taking your time and like, why are those things happening? And what are the ways that you can kind of even like, make a 3-degree shift in the direction that you're going and you'll end up in a much different place. Right. So I definitely think it applies to everything in our life, and especially the things that we've kind of created these patterns around that are not serving the goals that we have. What do you think about, I don't want to go like too like into the weeds on this. What do you think about how this applies to women as compared to men?
A dear friend of mine is focusing her business on helping women process invisible labor. All of the things that usually end up on our plates without anyone even making that conscious choice, kind of going back to the systems thing, it just lands there because a lot of times that's the narrative we were raised in. And for women, I think we are holding in our brains so many more things. If I think about just kind of today, my husband is watching Avery, my daughter, and that's it. He may have 1 or 2 other things on his plate today, right? And when I'm watching her during the week when he's at work, it's a whole different beast, right? I'm like, ooh, we need to get groceries for the week, and let's figure out what's going on over here with her clothes situation. She's outgrowing some things, and oh, I need to clean the fingernail polish out of the carpet that she spilled, like all the things. I have 50 different things in my head that have nothing to do with work, and then I layer that stuff on top of it, right? And I think for us as women, also we're a little bit more likely to potentially put superhuman expectations on ourselves of what we should be doing and what we should be achieving. So I was thinking about this a lot a few months ago, thankfully pre-COVID, when my daughter was sick one day, and she just needed me that day. She just was miserable and whatever. And by the end of the day, it was 5 p.m. when Andy came home. I had not showered. Our house looked like a disaster. And I had just hung out with her all day. And I stepped back from that and looked at it and said, you know what? This was a day well spent. I did not need to decide that actually, no, the house needed to be clean and I needed to look amazing. And I also needed to somehow work for 4 hours. Like that was not going to happen that day. And I made the choice to do that. And I consciously chose to not do the other things. And I think as women, that can be hard because we feel like, no, I should be able to build a 6-figure business and be a full-time mother and cook gourmet meals every evening and be an incredible friend and volunteer for this organization that is important to me all at the same time. And if I can't, I am a failure. And we put that shame on ourselves and this just incredibly high expectation where, sometimes that's in our own mind, sometimes it's external, there's all those other things. And I'm not an expert on any of that, but I think as women, there's just the weight is heavier and the number of things that we often are carrying is greater. And so it's even more important for us to be able to say no, to set up the systems in our life that serve what matters to us and to not apologize for whatever we choose not to do.
Mm-hmm. I was kind of laughing to myself when you were talking about, some of the expectations you could have put on yourself when you were spending the day with your daughter. And I was like, I wonder how many men come home from like a full day of work and are like, oh no, I didn't clean the house today, or I didn't cook the perfect dinner for my wife. Like, I'm sure there's some, so I'm not saying it's 100%, no on every single human that exists, but I really don't think that many men think about that. And I have my own perspective on like the concept of feminism and all of that. But I feel like one of the things that is really difficult in the society that we live in is this combination of like telling women that like from a feminist perspective that you can like do the same thing that men do and work the way men do and be as successful as men are. And then they're also supposed to
keep doing all of the things that from like a more traditional like wife and helper role would be, like you're also supposed to do that. It's not like we're equally telling men like a real productive man is one that helps around the house and vacuums and it's crazy because like my husband, he's pretty much taken over the cooking, even though I'm a nutritionist. So like you would think I would be the one that would be doing all the cooking and everything, but I basically taught him like the general system, the general method that I use to put a meal together. And sometimes I still have to give him feedback. Like he hasn't fully become 100% independent, but he's like 90% of the way there where I can trust, and I'm a control freak. So like, this is part of the challenge. I can trust him to go to the grocery store and cook. And maybe it won't be 100% what I would have done, but it's good enough. And it allows me to not worry, oh my gosh, I worked with clients until 7:00 tonight, and now I have to worry about getting dinner on the table. So it is something that obviously depends on your partner, but I've been really blessed to have a partner that is like, he's very masculine in the sense that he wants to work, he wants to provide, he wants to be successful, but he doesn't look at like cooking as being, well, that's my wife's job. And we hired a housekeeper. So like I walked downstairs. I work in my office upstairs, and I walked downstairs yesterday after my housekeeper was there, and the whole house was like, I mean, it's not like you wouldn't eat off the floor level clean, but it's like very organized, clean, like things are put away, all of that, dishes are done. And I'm like, I literally had this sense of, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I could work that whole day, back-to-back clients, calls, podcast interviews, all this stuff. And I come down and the house is clean. And my husband didn't have to do it because like he hates cleaning too. So it's just one of these things where for me to be successful as an entrepreneur, I had to really let go of any sort of personal expectation that I should be the one cooking and cleaning. And it sounds really weird that I had to like decide to do that. But honestly, my ability to be productive and successful and not like literally feel like I'm going to die has really hinged on making those decisions to let other people do the things that I think, would traditionally be like the wife's job or whatever. So, and it, like I said, it's interesting because I have a very weird perspective on feminism and all of that, but, I really like, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit. I really like understanding how we can work around a woman's natural tendencies to be like caregiver and nurturer and the multitasker, that kind of way that I really believe women were created, using that as a superpower rather than a liability when it comes to being productive and reaching your goals. So anyway, I didn't mean to just steal the mic from you. I really want to hear your perspective on this stuff, but I feel like this aligns with my next question, which is, what are some of the biggest obstacles women have when it comes to managing their time from a place of peace and confidence?
Yeah, that's a perfect segue, right? Because I think it's just so many of us are completely burned out and exhausted and don't get to do the things that we love for the pure reason that we love them, and that's really crappy. So I think, I was thinking about a few things that I've seen in myself that I've had to work through to get to a point of not constantly feeling that pressure. One of them I alluded to earlier was that superhuman expectation for ourselves. We think we need to be Wonder Woman, and then every single day when we fall short, it becomes this kind of compounding cycle of shame around it, especially for people who are more creative and might procrastinate and have a lot of ideas and different things they want to do. It can become this cycle of, well, I must not be good at this, that can be hard to rewire that understanding to say, no, I just haven't found a way to work with my natural gifting that is going to help me allocate my energy towards the things I love and the things that matter. So that's a huge one. Another one I think is in some ways abdicating leadership of our own time. And this can be in a variety of different areas of saying, oh, someone asked me to do something, therefore I must do it, right? Or this other person is doing something, therefore I must do it. And that becomes this compounding list of things that we might not even care about that much, but we think we should, or feeling like, oh, well, I can't say no to this person because they really need help. And, I should do this. And really struggling to say no. I was talking to someone the other day, and during COVID, when everything was shut down, they were the happiest they had ever been personally in their life, because all of that stuff had gone away. All of the external expectations, the places to go, the activities, the blah, 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 it was gone. And as things started to open up, all of a sudden the schedule started going back to where it was before. And so we talked a lot about setting policies that make it easier to say no, to say, you know what, I have a policy. I'm only doing things twice a week outside of the house in the evening or whatever. And I'm sorry, I already have stuff twice this week. Maybe in 4 weeks, we'll do that. And
now, let me check my calendar for next year, right?
Exactly. Or maybe sorry, I've planned out what I want to do and I don't have capacity for another thing. And even if it's a legitimate need or request, you can say no, because it's your policy. You've kind of set something external, so you're not feeling this internal angst every time that you can come back to. And then taking that sense of leadership to say, if I'm busy, if I'm stressed out, I have the resources I need to change this. And if other people are disappointed, if some things don't happen, that is okay. And the third thing that I've really noticed in myself, it came from a Thomas Merton quote, and he's one of my favorite authors. And one of the things he said is, one of the things that gives us peace at the end of the day is recognizing that we will miss out on many things in life. And there's nothing that's going to change that. We're finite, and there are so many things in the world, and we will miss out on many of them. And that sounds very discouraging and kind of sad. But in a way, when you really acknowledge that in yourself, it becomes quite freeing, because then you realize, you know what? There are some things that I will miss out on, and I cannot do everything. And that doesn't mean I'm inefficient. It doesn't mean I'm not productive. It doesn't mean I need to find a new way to get better at cramming more stuff in. It means saying, okay, I can only fit a few things into this life. What do I want them to be? And I can cut out everything else with recognition that if I try to cram it all in, I won't enjoy any of it, right? And so I call it the joy of missing out rather than the fear of missing out, right? Recognizing that you'll have some disappointment in your life when you really start looking at the capacity that you have and what you can fit in that capacity. But once you kind of wrestle with that disappointment and come to terms with it, you'll experience so much more peace in the rest of your life, because you've made a conscious choice. And now you get to actually experience the space and the joy around the things that you have chosen to retain. And that can be a lot of things. You might say, you know what? I have 2 toddlers in my house. My house will not be clean for 4 years. Like, I will keep up as best as I can, but my house will not be clean according to whatever standard I have in my head. And that is okay. It can be clean in 5 years. That will become a priority later. And once you kind of know that in the back of your head, all of a sudden you're not beating yourself up every single day that your house doesn't belong in a Pottery Barn magazine, right?
That would be a long 4 years if you're like every single day, just like in agony because the house doesn't look the way you want it to look. I don't have kids yet, but I'm like, I can imagine that'll be useful advice for me if and when I have kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just kind of can know that, like, you know what? Maybe someday I will learn another language, but it's not going to be this year. I'm just kind of making that choice and being okay with it.
Mm-hmm. And also not apologizing if you have people over or something and you're like, oh, my house is a disaster. It's like, I think most people probably don't care that much. And if you have kids, I think most people are aware that it's not you leaving the toys all over the floor or something like that. Right. So I don't know. I always feel like people are always so apologetic for not doing everything. And it's like, I almost feel like that just breeds this additional level of expectation that like, oh, wow, not only is there an expectation that my house is clean, but I need to be apologetic if it's not.
Yes.
So
yes, very much so. And the thing is, I think we set each other free when we make these choices and don't apologize for them, because then other people are like, wait, you're not upset. You're not stressed out. We're having a great time hanging out, having a beer on the deck because your house is a disaster. This is nice. Maybe I don't have to feel as stressed out either, And I went through that 3-year period when I was really stressed out, when I did not cook for any event I went to for 3 years, right? I would go to the store and buy cookies and bring them with me. And now, several years after the fact, I'm like, yeah, nothing bad happened because of that. 0 bad things, right? But if I had every time been like, I should cook something and now I have to go buy and put it in the crock pot and I'm stressed out and it didn't work out and blah, right? I just excised that entire part of my life and nothing bad happened. People ate Safeway cookies and none of them remember now probably that they did.
Probably not. I would assume they were not memorable.
No.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of these things where being an entrepreneur, I personally have gotten to this place where my time has become so valuable that I need to be very, very judicious about how I spend it. And that doesn't mean that I don't do things that are not income generating like this. That's certainly not the only thing I care about. But there's certain decisions I make, like even this week, I have a lot of stuff that I'm doing for preparing for another round of one of my programs. And so right now we don't normally have church on Wednesday nights, but right now we're doing church on Wednesday nights because of COVID. And I have a small group on Thursday nights that it's just like a small group of women that we meet together, and it's been really valuable for me. And it's like one of the few times during the week that I actually have like physical in-person contact. So it's very important. And this week I was like looking at my calendar in terms of getting something done for a project. And I was like, well, I really don't want to cut Thursday night because that's so important to me. So I ended up not going to church on Wednesday night. And that doesn't mean like I don't care about church. It was just like, I knew this was a weird week and like I had to get this stuff done. And I knew I had to cut some stuff that was important, but understanding that in the future, like that's still normally my Wednesday night is like blocked off for that. So I do think we can have priorities that shift in like a very short period of time. Like you said, like really busy. I don't have time to make something for this thing that I'm going to, but I still want to go. So rather than like not go because I'm embarrassed I'm not cooking or like not bring anything and feel bad about it, I'm going to like just do my best and show up with I do the rotisserie chicken when I do. I'm all about that $5 rotisserie chicken from the grocery store, but like it was just so easy to bring it. And it meant I didn't have to change my work schedule to like accommodate that. And I didn't have to skip it because I was like putting all this pressure on myself to like, make it the way I thought it should be. So I do feel like there's going to be seasons where sometimes you have to make decisions that maybe aren't optimal, quote unquote optimal, or like the way you'd like to do it, but it allows you to then enjoy the experience or make the most out of it rather than like stressing yourself out and then also not even like enjoying the experience because you were so stressed out about getting the food put together. So, I want to kind of switch gears a little bit because something that I feel like this week was like a lesson in procrastination for me. I've gotten better about procrastinating. But I also tend to work better under a tight deadline, which is kind of annoying because like, it's like, I'll like wait, I'll put stuff off until it's like, well, I can't put it off anymore. So,
Good.
So, this week Wednesday night, the night I was supposed to go to church, skipped church, and then was working until midnight that night to get the stuff done. Yeah. And I was like, okay, this isn't really the way I want to live my life. Like I'm going to have to figure out, what's the best way to, not do this because I don't want to do it that way. And like I said, I think I've made a lot of progress as an entrepreneur, realizing like you can't live like that. You can't operate like that because you're going to go crazy if it's always doing everything at the last minute. But there's still times when, again, you don't realize how long something's going to take. And all of a sudden it's like the deadline's coming up. I got to, shuffle some stuff. So all of that said, for people like me who struggle with procrastination, what advice do you have for dealing with that or eliminating it or, working around it, whatever the
whatever the appropriate terminology is.
Yeah. So one thing that's always worth doing, if you find yourself procrastinating, is kind of digging a little bit below the surface. So like you were talking about, for some of us, it's a habit or kind of a way that we're used to working and that we really enjoy working, kind of just getting stuff done and having that kind of time deadline. But sometimes it also has a very specific underlying cause. So for me, today I set aside a couple of hours to write. I'm writing a book that's coming out in April, and I need to write 2 chapters a week between now and Halloween. So have that pressure, but I find myself in the middle of a sentence being like, I wonder if I have any notifications on my phone, right? Like much, much more susceptible to distraction and to procrastination than I do in any other project. And the reason, right, is because this is taking a lot of creative energy from me. It's hard. I'm like feeling this resistance in my brain, like trying to put these down. I want it to be perfect, right? I want to have the perfect phrase. I'm constantly having to remind myself, like, this is the crappy first draft. I just need to put it down in the worst way possible and then go from there. But I noticed that. So when I step back, it's like, oh, this is why I'm getting distracted. It's not because I'm lazy. It's not because I'm a bad person. It's just, this is hard for me. So let me think about how I can work with myself here. So what I do when I start feeling that is I do the Pomodoro technique, which I don't use all the time, but that's where I'll set a timer for 20 minutes and be like, just write for 20 minutes. And then you're going to get to watch a YouTube video. And then you're going to write for 20 minutes instead of like, I'm going to write for 2 hours and this is going to work. Like, no. So you can do things like that, where if you realize what's under the procrastination, sometimes you will then be able to find a way to work through it with yourself rather than beating yourself over the head for procrastinating. Another example is a client of mine really struggled with staying up too late every night, then sleeping in later than she wanted in the morning, and kind of feeling behind from the beginning of the day. And she's like, I just need to get to bed earlier. When I do, I feel so much better. And so she tried all these things to make herself go to bed on time, and none of them were working. But when we dug in under there, what we found was that superhuman expectation that we were talking about earlier, where when she woke up in the morning, she felt like she was going to have to throw her weight against this boulder, just impossible expectations for herself, this huge list. And so what was happening in her brain is like, the sooner I fall asleep, the sooner I have to do that. So let's watch another episode instead, right? And so once we started shrinking that boulder a little bit and saying, hey, instead of expecting yourself to do 70 things tomorrow, let's have you do 3. All of a sudden, that started loosening that. It still meant she had to change the habit and things like that, but she didn't have to go to war with herself to try to change that habit. So that's one of them, is kind of go deeper, see where the procrastination is coming from, and acknowledging that. Sometimes even just acknowledging it helps. Another thing is to kind of think about, all right, if this is how I work for whatever reason, I just really like just banging it out last minute, get it done. Is there a way I can work with myself in that? And this can be a system you can set up, right? There's also, I think it was Parkinson's principle, if I remember the name correctly, where your work will expand to fit the container you give it, right? So you can give yourself a smaller container artificially, right? So if you know you have a big project coming up, you can say, all right, you know what? I am going to give myself only an hour to do this piece of the puzzle on Tuesday afternoon. And I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to work on it for an hour, and then I'm going to be done. That's going to be my deadline for that piece. And you can kind of give yourself that environment a little bit for each piece of the puzzle as you go, so you're not ended up stacking. Another thing I'll do a lot with my clients who maybe end up really stressed out before a deadline because they gave themselves, 2 weeks to plan a summit or something like that, is to kind of, when they set out to do a project, to kind of map out what that really is going to mean. So they can look at that and say, you know what? I'm going to give myself 6 weeks instead, because I've looked at this honestly and what this is really going to take to get this off, across the finish line. And oh yeah, I forgot I'm going to be out for an entire week here. So probably should give myself a little extra time for that too. And you can then give yourself a little more space with some deadlines along the way. Like, all right, I want to have the copy for the sales page done by this date. And I want to have the card open on this date, and I want to have the course ready on this date. And those become deadlines for yourself, because especially when you're an entrepreneur, you are your own boss. There's no one out there being like, hey, where's the sales page? So that's where you kind of have to be the boss in some ways and make your own deadlines, and pretend they're real.
Yeah. I feel like for me, a lot of times that procrastination is because it, like you mentioned, a sales page. The sales page doesn't have to be ready until open cart, right? So it's like, in theory, as long as it's ready by open cart, that's all that matters. And that's the deadline, right? Is like when, if somebody lands on this page and it's broken, or it's like a 404 redirect, it's like, okay, well, that's not good. But then, waiting until the last minute to do it, I think, it creates this like scramble to do it. And then you don't really know how long it's going to take. And then it's like, you just keep working on it until it's like, okay, it's like getting there, that kind of thing. So that's something I've definitely done with, my more recent, like this launch that I'm preparing for, that by the time this goes out, it'll have already happened. But the launch that I'm preparing for, I kind of put out the whole, like what needs to get done in terms of like the actual, like individual things, like specific emails that need to go out, specific pages that need to be done, specific times that like Facebook ads need to be going, that kind of thing. And then backtracked from like, okay, well, what date do I want to start the program? Okay, so if the program starts on that date, what date do I want to have the card open? Okay, so that starts the week before. If that's when the card is open, when does the webinar happen? Like that happens that day. And then it's like all working backwards to build it out. And then, like you said, actually putting it into my calendar to work on stuff. So, and I'm still getting better at this stuff. Like right now I have the whole project planned in Asana, and I think next time I run a launch, I'll want to go even further with that, where after I've set the due dates, I also need to block time in my calendar to do it. Because I think what'll happen for me is if it's not specific to a task that needs to get done, I do block off like project blocks in my calendar just to hold the space. But sometimes that project block, if it's not specific enough, just turns into like putting out email fires, or like, like just doing work for that 3-hour block or something, rather than saying, okay, I have these promotional emails that need to get written. I'm going to set that time aside for that. So it's a learning process for sure, especially as an entrepreneur. I feel like until you've done something like a launch, you don't really know how much work goes into it. Even if you have a really awesome program that's guiding you through the steps, like you don't really know until you do it how much time it's going to take, or all the things that need to go into it. And so sometimes it's a matter of just like doing your best. And like, if it's kind of doing things at the last minute because you forgot about them or didn't realize you needed to do them, like just getting it done and realizing that next time, okay, I'll plan for that next time. But it's there. Every time I launch, it gets a little bit better, but it's definitely like every launch I've done, and I've been launching since like 2015. Every launch I've done, there's always like another thing that could have been done better to make it easier for me. So for all of our entrepreneurs out there listening, don't feel like you have to have it all perfectly scheduled to do it. Just know that, the first time you do it, it's probably not going to be perfectly scheduled whatsoever. And you can use that experience to then say, okay, what am I going to do next time to make this run more smoothly, and just improve from there?
Yeah. It's a constant iteration. I think that's been the biggest thing for me to learn too, is there is no such thing as a rival. We could just
We're always waiting to feel like, okay, I've done all the work. And it, like literally you never feel like you've done it all.
No, you can constantly grow, constantly change. There will always be things that, throw a wrench in the equation or whatever. And you can, I'm definitely not a proponent of like, oh, if you have the right systems, everything will be perfect every time. Like that's physically impossible. We cannot control time. We can lead time, but we cannot control it. And when you learn, you can't catch everything before you start, right? You just got to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like there's probably a lot of things in life, including like having kids. You don't know, and I'm speaking from vicarious experience from friends and family, but you could probably plan ahead as much as possible, read all the books, buy all the stuff. And then when the baby comes, like it's not what you were expecting and you have to completely adapt to it. But then when you go to have your second kid,
it's not that it's easy to have a second kid, and there's new challenges with having a first kid and an infant, obviously, but it's probably, you already have some systems in place that are ready to be used. And then, if you have a third kid, it's hopefully even easier if it's, all things go healthfully. But it's like, there's only so much you can really plan for when you're doing a brand new thing. And you just have to kind of be like rigid flexibility, where it's like, you're flexible in the sense that I can adapt if things aren't working the way that I wanted them to work. But the rigid piece is not just letting all your systems just kind of like burn to the ground and like have nothing guiding any of your decisions because, well, my original plan didn't work. So now I'm just going to like completely, I forget what the word is, but just like let things happen as they happen. Right. And hopefully it all turns out well, so awesome. So I feel like I have so many questions I could ask you, but I feel like what we'll do is just kind of wrap on this last one, because I know that this is a really big topic. And I think a lot of what we're talking about right now is more like beliefs and perspectives and like, some strategy. But I think pretty much anytime we're making change in our life, it's always going to come from the beliefs that we have about the way things should be. So I think it's important to talk about the beliefs. But when we're thinking about systems and thinking about, systems are not just for getting stuff done. It's not just about checking off your task list. It's not just about like your color-coded calendar or something like that. It's really everything we do operates out of a system, whether we know it or not. How can systems play a role in helping women find joy in their personal lives, not just get more done?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So I think for me, one of the things I've had to realize about myself is that I'm not actually that great at consistently living life in line with what matters most to me, right? So when I think about my values of faith and family and doing work that makes my community better and that serves the world, like those are all things that matter to me deeply. But if I'm in the middle of a day and something crazy is going on in my website, all of a sudden that's all I'm thinking about, right? And so the systems that I have in place for myself actually are meant to protect the things that matter in my life. So I can kind of give the specifics of what that looks like what those systems are and how I use them. And obviously as an entrepreneur, they're relevant to that, but I think they can apply anywhere. So every morning I go through a kind of a morning ritual of reading something that reminds me of my values. And some of those are just statements, right? They can be, I am loved by God, most important thing in my life is my family, just reminding myself of these things every single morning, kind of centering on those things, remembering them. So that's a system. It's a morning routine that I have. I also, every 6 weeks, plan out what I want to have happen over the next 6 weeks. And that helps me step back from just responding to the urgent things in my life and say, okay, in my business, here's what I want to have happen. And this is something you can do in your personal life too, to say, you know what, over the next 6 weeks, I want to go on a date night with my spouse, or I want to, make sure we have an entire Saturday where we do nothing but spend time together. We're going to get that on the calendar right now, right? So kind of stepping back, making that plan. I don't go, let's plan the entire year and break it down by quarters and by months, because life changes too much for that. 6 weeks is usually enough to say, all right, I can do something with this period of time. What do I want that to be? So that is my planning ritual for chunks of time. And then every week, same thing, right? I think about how much time I have available for work. I think about what's already blocked off for calls and meetings and events and other things like that. And then I allocate my work to the time that's available so that when it's time for me to log off, I've knocked off everything that's on my to-do list and I can unplug from my work and then switch roles and focus on my family. So there are these things that I do and have placed in my life purposely to make sure that my toddler doesn't kind of disappear into the sidelines of my work, because I have natural workaholic tendencies. I love what I do. And so it's really easy for me to just go and not think about the fact like, oh, if I look back, I've only spent X amount of hours with her, and that's not as many as I wanted. And that kind of defeats the whole point of starting this in the first place, because that's why I started this in the first place, right? So I think for people listening who are trying to figure out like, okay, maybe I'm an entrepreneur, maybe I'm not, how can I use systems to protect joy in my own life? I think one good part would be to sit down and think about, all right, what are the things that are most important to me? And how does that play out in like a specific action? So if family dinners are really, really important to you, how can you protect that time and set up systems in your life to say, all right, here's our policy. Even though we have like 4 kids in sports, three nights a week, we're having dinner together, and come hell or high water, we're going to figure out a way to do that, right? Or, you know what, I need to have a monthly date night with my spouse because otherwise we're ships passing in the night, and you can think about these things and come up with very practical systems and policies that you can put in place to say, all right, if I just wait for things to happen, these things are not going to happen, right? The urgent will take over, and we'll somehow find ourselves, and I'm guilty of this, we're going on our first date night tonight in months because I didn't have a system in place for that. And so it was always like, oh, it'll happen. No, it won't happen, right? And so when my husband and I especially kind of talk through things because something's not working, something that's really helped us in our communication too is to bring that back to the system. So to say, hey, you're gone like a lot on the weekends. Let's go back to the system and think about how we can practically set some things up to protect some time together on the weekends, because I need more time for all of us to be together, and that's a lot easier of a conversation than to say, why are you always gone on the weekends? I'm really mad at you. I am not getting enough from you. And he's like, what do you want from me? Right. So you can kind of take the things that aren't working, the things that feel a little off, the things that are stressful, bring it back to the system that's causing that to happen and say, all right, I can do something about this. I can change this in a way that's going to work better for us. And I know if you have a full-time job, you don't have as much control over the day-to-day. You're going to have things that have to happen no matter what, but you can still find ways in your family and in your life to say, you know what, here's some things we're just going to cut off the list because this is important to me. And we're going to make sure this happens. And this is how that's going to happen. Right. So yeah, I think when you see them and kind of pull those systems out into the light, it's like, oh, okay. I can't just want things to be different, but I can change things here to protect what matters to me and recognize that I have to fight for those things.
Mm-hmm. I love it. And I definitely resonate with the tendency to just overwork. And it's not like I'm slogging away at this job. It's more of I love what I do and I have all these people I want to help. And it's just like, we run out of time. Right. So I for sure have gotten to that place in my business at this point where it's like, I really have to start making more boundaries around it. 'Cause I'm very prone to just like stuffing more in because I'm like, I can help more people. I can work with more clients. Like, this is awesome. Let me do more. So for sure resonate with that. And then with date night, we don't have kids. So I definitely have a lot more freedom. I don't have to like worry if I have a babysitter, if we want to go do something, but I still I have a recurring calendar block on Friday nights. It just says date night. Cause it's like, I don't want anything to get scheduled during that time. And even something happened, I think it was last Friday, where I kind of ate into that time a little bit because there was an appointment I wanted to book and it was the only time that I could fit in my schedule. And I was like, okay, let me just do the 6 to 7 o'clock block on Friday night. And I didn't communicate that to my husband. And he's like, I got us a reservation at this restaurant for 7 o'clock on Friday. Like literally he tells me that day. I was like, I'm on a call until 7. Like, can we please change it? So it's just funny because now he just expects that we have that time rightfully, right? Like he rightfully expects that that's available at that point. And I forgot to tell him that I had scheduled something because I just wasn't even like thinking about it. So it's funny how when the system is set up where, again, it's just a recurring calendar block. It's not something that I'm like actively thinking about. But because I created that block, now I know in the future, if I do anything to that block, I have to definitely communicate with my husband. And maybe it's just, and I'm laughing because he scheduled our appointment tonight, or appointment. Ugh, that's terrible that I called it an appointment. Our reservation, our date night reservation. He scheduled it for 7:45. I think out of like a little timidity, like I don't know if
like I'm just gonna
he's like, she's been working a lot. Let me just do a later reservation. So anyway, it's one of these things where again, that block of time is important to me and it's in my calendar. And if I do eat into it for whatever reason, it's got to be either both communicated to my husband and it's got to be for a really important thing. So I'm sure if we have kids, it'll be different, like, different issues with babysitting and that kind of thing. But still, if it's not a block in my calendar, there's a lot of risk of it becoming taken by something else. And I definitely agree with the whole, having kids and the kids being top priority, but then the business, because you love what you do and because it's fun and it's exciting and it's cool to see what you're capable of and all of that. It's so easy to let that become the thing that's taking the most amount of time. And I think if we're not careful, we can end up losing the stuff that is really, and not losing in terms of like your kid's not going to like leave or like your husband's not going to divorce you or something, but you miss out on the stuff that is really important to you in life. And it's just, there's just less of that experience because you chose to allow your work schedule or your commitments to overtake that time. So I think it is really important. And like you said, we can't do everything and we shouldn't expect to do everything. And we do really need to be very intentional around selecting what we are putting our time into because it is so limited. This has been really awesome. I've really enjoyed talking to you about this. And I love your perspective. If people want to learn more, whether they're an entrepreneur or not, it sounds like you have a lot of really cool tips and strategies. I know you specifically work with entrepreneurs. What would be the next step for someone if they wanted to get more? I know you said you have a book coming out, but more immediately, what would be a great next step for them to continue this conversation with you?
Yeah. So I created a really simple 30-minute training on how to knock out your to-do list every day. So that's kind of a specific thing that a lot of people struggle with around, like every single day, there's just more stuff. And so it's a free audio training. You can download it at www.asquaredonline.com/momentum. And you can listen to it while you're driving or cooking or whatever. I wanted to make it a really easy to absorb method, since if you need it, you are busy. But that can be kind of a great way to keep the conversation going. And you can also find me on LinkedIn or on Ashlee at asquaredonline.com. My name's spelled with 2 E's just to make things good and confusing. But I am more than happy to have conversations with anyone who would like to talk more about this or has questions. But that audio is kind of a good, very step-by-step process of this is how I plan my time. This is how I make sure every day I'm sitting down to a list of, a small list of projects that I know I can accomplish in that day. So I have that sense of momentum every day. So that's a great first step. And yeah.
Great. Well, and I'm looking forward to your book coming out because it sounds like it'll be a nice extension of that. And we know it'll be published on time because you're using systems to get it done.
Yeah. And I'm in a program that's even more systematic than I am, which is fantastic. Wow. So the book will be called Eureka Results. It's about turning our best ideas into reality and leveraging systems to do that. So it will be this conversation continued for sure.
Awesome. Very exciting. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us. And I know I learned a lot, and I bet a lot of our listeners are feeling ready to start using systems to make their life more purposeful. So thank you so much, Ashlee. It was really great to chat with you. And thanks to those of you for listening, spending the last hour with us. We'll see you here next time on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody.
Hey, everyone. Laura Schoenfeld here again. As you know, I absolutely love working with women from all walks of life to help them create a purpose-filled life that they love. And over the past 2 years, I've expanded my mission to help nutrition business owners drop the hustle and come into alignment with their ideal business goals so they can work from a sense of ease and abundance and grow their income and their impact with joy. Unlike other business coaches, I have experience in the integrative and functional medicine, health, and wellness industry. And I've heavily invested in my own online business training and mentorship to get to a place where I'm now bringing in multiple six figures of revenue on an annual basis. Would you believe that I've invested over $130,000 in my own business development and mentorship over the past 7+ years? And honestly, that's just the financial cost of growing my business. It's taken me hours and hours of testing, learning, experimenting, and lots of failing to get to the place where I am today. After all this, I can tell you one thing with absolute certainty. There's no way I would be where I am today if I had not been willing to invest in my growth and to find the incredible mentors who have helped me accelerate my business faster than I ever imagined. The truth is that running an online business can be incredibly isolating. And if you don't have the right strategy or systems in place, it can take up nearly every waking minute of your free time, which is a recipe for a major health disaster and some serious business burnout. To grow your business to 6 figures and beyond without destroying your physical and mental health, you need support from both a mentor and a community of people who know what it's like to run a nutrition business online, who can help you succeed faster and easier than you'd be able to on your own. And that's why I'm so excited to offer a space for you to experience joyful and profitable business growth while being surrounded and supported by other driven nutritionists on the same thrilling journey of entrepreneurship. This opportunity is my annual mastermind. In the mastermind, you'll create relationships that will last a lifetime and achieve results in your business that you never would have imagined for yourself. If you want to learn more about this mastermind opportunity, go to lauraschoenfeld.com/mastermind. On that page, you'll find everything you need to know about what the mastermind includes and how to apply for your spot. I'd love to connect with you further about the business that you're growing and how the mastermind can help you support your goals. So go to lauraschoenfeld.com/mastermind to send in your application, and I look forward to chatting with you soon.